Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor here with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast, and got something pretty neat for you today. Have an individual with us who I think you're really going to enjoy meeting. Certainly a wonderful person to talk to, and I think we're gonna cover some cool stuff today. And that's Professor Ted Spiker, and you'll find more about him at tedspiker.com. He is a prolific author. I'll certainly let him speak to his work more, but you can find him on runnersworld.com. He is the author of the Big Guy blog. You can also find him at thebodycast.org, and that's his show, which is wonderful. And then Twitter, he is quite active at Prof Spiker. So, Ted, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Well, Ted, let's just get into it right from the very beginning here in terms of your story, because you have quite a unique resume here, and I'd like to share that with the audience.
Well, I got into health and fitness writing as I started my journalism career, and I've always liked health and fitness, and I've always liked being a participant. But I am not an expert. I'm not somebody who knows every little thing, and I'm certainly not somebody that anybody would look at and say, wow, this guy is a beacon of fitness. I'm just an average guy who loves sweating, but I also love eating, and I love playing, and I love doing all kinds of fitness activities. So I worked at a magazine for a little while early in my career, and then when I made a jump to a bigger magazine, I went to Men's Health, and I worked there as an editor and wrote there too. And I just fell in love with the whole idea of writing about health and fitness and being able to communicate to readers who are in similar situations as me, maybe struggling a little bit, maybe yo-yoing a little bit up and down, and just kind of capturing those mountains that we go up and down when we're in the quest for, our own bodily perfection, whatever that means. So I spent 3-4 years at Men's Health working on that kind of material, and then I came down here to the University of Florida to teach journalism, to teach magazine writing, and just kept my hand in writing about health and fitness, and writing about not only my experiences but interviewing experts about trends and about the science and about health and medicine and the psychology of all aspects of health. And I just think it's such a fascinating area in terms of not just the science and not just what works and what doesn't work, but you combine the science with the emotional and complexity of the psychology of a lot of people going through health issues. And I think that it's a real important area for people like me in the media to be able to cover, whether we're writing about other people, whether we're writing about ourselves, whether we're, part of a bigger community online where people are supporting each other too. So, I get a kick out of trying new things and experimenting with new workouts and kind of putting myself out there and sometimes succeeding, lots of times failing, and just kind of enjoying the journey as you go.
Oh, I think that's great. Well, I really love how you bring that everyman perspective, and really oftentimes in the internet community, for lack of better terms, you're going to get an overrepresentation of the 1%. And I think it's always great to bring a little bit of reality check to that. And certainly, I mean, you is a proper word to say here, because your co-authoring credits are just phenomenal. You've co-authored the owner's manual, you on a diet, you staying young, you being beautiful, you having a baby, you raising a child, you the owner's manual for teens, and then like 7 abs diet books. So what, I mean, after all of this experience and looking at it from a different angle than many people in the industry, a couple things I'd love to cover is, one, what do you see as, for exercise, for eating, and for the emotional side of things, for each of those, what are some of the things around trends that you think are here to stay?
Great question. And I appreciate you talking about the things that I've worked on. And the cool thing about it is it gives me a chance, as a journalist and somebody who works with a variety of different people, it gives you a chance to listen to different perspectives and hear different points of view, because I think sometimes, so-called experts in their field which are, they're great, but they have a certain point of view that's that's their angle and that's their framing of how all diet and exercise issues, work. And it may work for some people and it may not work for other people. So I think I have had a little bit of an advantage, and I've been able to work with different people, not just experts, but also journalists and editors, and kind of get a holistic perspective. So, back to your question, what does work and what is here to stay? I think a lot of people really hone in on the two foundations of when we're talking about weight loss, the nutrition side and the exercise side, and they talk about the science of it, and hugely important. Obviously, that's the foundation. But I think what people don't think about as much, they think about, but they don't really give as much time and attention to, is what's the foundation under the foundation. And the foundation under the foundation is the psychology of it all. So, somebody may uncover what the absolute best exercise is to help you lose weight, but if your psychology is not wired to handle that exercise under the parameters that you're supposed to, it's not going to work, and it doesn't matter. So, I think in terms of what's here to stay, the thing that really needs to be done is everybody really needs to kind of examine and adapt the information that they're getting and how they can base it and work it into their own lifestyle, their own personality. And I'm not trying to go all Dr. Phil and trying to get all, new agey when it comes to the mind aspect of it, but I really think that's a huge part of making the other two prongs work. So for me, for example, I think that when it comes to exercise, I've tried everything. I love doing a lot of different things. My week usually looks different from week to week. I'm not somebody who says, okay, here's my 18-week plan and I'm going to plan my workouts to a T. I like variety. I like doing a different thing every day. I like change. I also like the aspect of playing when it comes to working out, so that it's not just a grinded out workout, but you're really busting your tail because you're playing, whether you're doing group exercise or whether you're playing a game of pickup basketball, or even making some kind of internal competition with how you lift weights. So I think variety and play are two huge parts of the exercise formula that I think work for a lot of people if they can kind of get themselves in that frame of mind. But again, that's personality driven. Some people like more structure and more rigidity when it comes to putting together a plan for nutrition. I mean, obviously you're more the expert than I am when it comes to this. And I think there are so many fascinating things that people like to talk about when it comes to eating trends. And I think there's a lot of important things. And I think, I mean, it certainly goes without saying that your good, wholesome foods are greater than your processed, not so healthy foods. I think that's obviously the given, but I think, some of the things that, are part of that is, how do I get that to work? What are the key elements to get that to work? So for me, for exercise, I like variety, but, a lot of the things that you hear in terms of eating, lack of variety is really the key. If you have the same thing for breakfast or lunch and it's healthy and it's within a certain calories rate and it's made with the important macronutrients that you need, then there's no deviation, there's no thought, there's no decision making, and there's no temptation to, dive into a bowl of whipped cream at noon. So it's in that way, maybe it's the lack of variety that works. And I think we're all in a tough spot now. We're all in a tough spot with all these food options, with all of the ease to get these, on the surface, really pleasurable foods that are quick fixes. And the trick for both of those two elements, nutrition and exercise, I think, is really finding how your personality works into what you know to do, what you're supposed to do, and what is best for your body.
Well, Ted, I think that's such a profound truth, which, like so many profound truths, if we take a step back, it seems like common sense, because what we're basically saying here is what's important is finding an approach that works for you, which everyone's like, okay, I get that, but they don't actually get that because we spend so much time saying, okay, external source, tell me exactly what I need to do. Or we spend time arguing with one another saying, well, you're not following this let's call it religion, because that's the way it's treated often. You're not following this religion's doctrine precisely enough. But then the person over here is like, well, but it doesn't work for me. Losing sight that the goal is this N of one, what works for you. I was saying this to an individual I was speaking to the other day, where if we met someone who had some odd genetic mutation, were eating Cheetos and drinking Coke, actually made them healthier. Like, we could test their blood lipid panel, and we're like, man, your HDL is improving. Your triglycerides are improving. The more sugar and processed garbage you eat, then for that person, that's what they should be doing.
Right.
But we don't. We're always looking for the cookie cutter approach where it's all about us and what works for you as the individual.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example. I think is it the National Weight Control Registry that tracks long-term weight loss and people who have maintained a loss of, I think it's over 100 pounds, and what the key elements are. And I think one of the things that they say is a common factor among those who lose weight and maintain it is that they weigh themselves very frequently. I'm not sure if it's every day or every week or whatnot. Okay, so if I follow that plan and I say, okay, I'm going to start weighing myself every day or every week or whatever the outline is. At the beginning of a weight loss plan or a diet, or when somebody goes and says, I really need to change around my life, to me, that is the most defeating thing you can do, because you think you are busting it, you're eating right. Man, I've spent 10 days doing everything perfectly, and the needle doesn't move. Or the needle moves up because you've gained a little muscle or because you got water weight that day. So what I found works for me is that when I'm in a spot where I need to lose weight, and I say, I'm not weighing myself. There's no way I'm weighing myself for the first month or 6 weeks, because I'm going to get derailed. I'm going to get frustrated, and I'm just going to get angry. But once I get on the scale, maybe 6 weeks, and I see a little bit of movement, I see a little bit of progress, then I say, okay, now it's every week, and now we're on, because now it works in my favor, because now I've seen that it's good, and maybe I get a pound or two fluctuation here or there, and it's not deflating, and it's actually inspiring me, and say, okay, I'm ready to go at this on Monday morning. I got weigh-in day. But at the beginning of a plan, for me, no way. Doesn't work. So it's just an example of, like, you got to take somebody's guideline and say, okay, I know whether it's going to work for me or not going to work for me, and how do I maintain momentum of good habits that I've made? Because if you start making good habits, one little trigger can just throw you off. And I know that. I mean, I've yo-yoed my whole life, and I know that one little trigger is enough to say, forget this whole thing. It's not worth it. Pass me those Cheetos.
Well, no, and that's a brilliant example with the scale, Ted, because again, you said if weighing yourself helps you, do it. If it demoralizes you, stop. I mean, it's I don't know how. Don't do what doesn't work. Right. But we all do that, and that's. I'm curious from a psychological perspective. Like we've all experienced that. We've all continued to do things that we know don't work, often because something external is insisting that it does. How can we empower ourselves to really be our own compass?
Well, I'm gonna refer you to somebody who's a friend of mine who I've worked with a little bit in terms of interviewing him, and he's influenced some of my writing and some of my experiences. Is a guy named Doug Newberg, who is a not sure exactly how to call him, but a performance coach. So he studies, how elite performers perform and what makes them excel. And I've had many talks with him, and it's really interesting. His premise is the notion of feel. So it's not feelings, it's not emotions, it's feel. What feels right? How do you feel? It's more like a vibe. It's more like an energy. And I think we're in this world where data drives so much. So what numbers on the scale? How many calories did I eat? What's my body fat percentage? How fast did I run that mile? And we use that data to track progress, right? And that's one of our metrics. There's many ways that we use our metrics. So from a psychological standpoint, if this happens to me on runs all the time. I am not a very good runner, but I plug away and I try to improve. But if I look down at my watch and my mile pace is different than what I think it is, it kills me. I'm like, are you kidding me? I think I'm busting it, and it says X, Y, and Z. So data, as useful as it can also be that same thing and can be demoralizing. So what Doug says, is that we really should be harnessing this concept of feel. Okay, so when we go out for a run, leave the watch at home. You don't have to track every mile. You don't have to track every distance. Go out and run for the joy of running, and you will get better. You will get faster. Some days will be good, some days will be bad. And it's the same thing for any kind of exercise or any kind of, physical activity, is that not everything has to be so data driven. Everything is really driven. For him, everything is really driven by feel and what it feels like. And when you get that nailed down and you're driven by intrinsic factors rather than those external factors, then all the other stuff falls into place,
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I love that. And I think it's also another way to help, like someone I can imagine listeners listening and saying, well, I like those numbers and those, they give me a sense of control or almost like some guardrails, but they can also be very confining. And I think this concept of, in some ways, well, if you're happy with what you're doing, then you're fine, keep it up. But if you're not happy with what's going on, just try this.
That's right.
Like if you're gaining weight and you're continuously weighing yourself, what do you have to lose by stop weighing yourself? Like it's not, if what you're doing is working, then it's all good. Then you're probably just hearing this podcast and saying, yeah, that's what I do. But if what you're doing isn't working, then what do you have to lose by turning inward rather than turning outward and just seeing how you feel? I know, in some ways it's hard, but in some ways it's also the easiest thing you could do.
That's right. Yeah, and I think that's why Doug can be very frustrated by some of the things that we do in today's society because of all of these kind of measurements and goals and feeling like we have to reach certain standards, when it's really about go out and enjoy a run because it's 55 degrees and perfect running weather. And so what if it's 10 seconds per mile slower than you normally do? It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're getting paid for that, or unless your endorsement contract is on the line, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with goals. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's certainly. And it goes to the point, well, some people are driven better by data. Some people will take that negative data and translate it into an energy that makes them do better and excel. So it's exactly to the point that we talked about, which is like, I'm not anti-data. I mean, sometimes I go through a data period and sometimes I don't, but some people see a bad number and they're like, all right, me versus you, me versus that number on the clock. Let's go. And that's positive too.
Well, and what I hear you saying, Ted, is it's really not anti anything except anti other than doing that which doesn't work and expecting different results.
Yes.
Like that just don't do that.
Right.
And the good news is, and Ted, tell me if you disagree with this, is that, like, I mean, for example, just like with I always use the example of fashion. There's no one outfit that looks good on every person, but there are some universal truths. Like if you wear your pants on your head, most people probably won't say you look good. So there's this doesn't mean we all have to. I mean, we're all Homo sapiens. It's like, if we get strep throat, it's not like the doctor is going to treat each of us completely differently to cure that illness. So if we consider metabolic dysfunction, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, there are going to be common threads. So we can start with that. But then you're gonna have to refine. And Ted, I'm curious what you think about this. The amount of attention this I would consider maybe at max 10%, but more maybe like 5% variability. Like if individuals would focus on eating so much nutrient-dense food that you find in nature that isn't processed and stay active and do a little bit of higher intensity movement, like you're good. Like that's 90+% of it. But it's like, well, we want to focus on this supplement or this micronutrient or this new exercise fad. And that makes it seem so complicated. Whereas in reality, it might not actually be. What do you think?
I agree with that. And I think that it's taking that foundation and that base, the non-processed foods and the movement, and then saying, how do you keep yourself going on that. I mean, I talk to people all the time who are, basically 99.5% clean in their eating, and they don't even think about pie. I mean, it's like it's not even a thought for them. But for most of, at least in my experience, for a lot of society, pie and cake and ice cream and pizza and burgers and bacon burgers, that's all part of our fabric. So, and it's something that we enjoy. So the question is, how do you integrate these little things in with that foundation? How do you enjoy for yourself, one little meal that maybe is a treat every once in a while? Or, how do you take the principles of what they're saying about cinnamon and integrate it into your, regular eating patterns, rather than thinking that's the cure-all. The cure-all, obviously, as we all know, is long-term sustaining of the good habits. That's the cure-all. So whatever those little things are that help you get there, there's nothing wrong with them as long as you understand that it's part of the big picture.
Yeah, and if those little things, going back to the Uber point of like, if it helps you, good. If it doesn't, stop. Like this has just been my experience. Like the more top 10 lists and like quick, try this, do that individuals read, the more this become. I mean, unless you're retired and you just have time on your hands, like we've all got so much stuff going on. Like in some ways, I feel like one of the most empowering ways an individual can have sustained success is if things like eating and exercise in some ways can be almost on autopilot. Like you're not constantly having to think, okay, what do I do now? Oh my God, like how do I integrate this? What do I do? Because it can't, like it just cannot be that complicated. I mean, the rates of obesity and diabetes were dramatically lower before anyone worried about any of this stuff. Granted, we live in a different society now, I get that, but still, like it cannot be now if you want to be an athlete, you want to be a professional athlete, right, that's a different story. But if you just want to not die, it can't be that complicated.
Right. Exactly. But I interviewed a cardiologist from Portland a couple of weeks ago, and he said exactly that. You know what? I like running because it's what I do for my activity. I know my program. I know my times that I'm going to do it, and it's set, and that's what I do. And he has a very similar way in the way he approaches eating, and that works exactly well for him. And he's in great shape, and it works right for him. Now, it would drive me crazy to do the same exercise, 5-6 days a week. And I don't think it would work for me necessarily. I mean, whether it's body breaking down or whether it feels like it's boredom or whatever it is. So I think, everybody is kind of in this weird world of making it work for them.
Well, and again, this in some ways it sounds. I mean, I'm going to pose a challenge to the listeners of this podcast, because in some ways I bet listeners, because I'm even thinking this myself, you're hearing this and you're saying, well, okay, duh, I got it. But at the same time, you're like, wait a minute, didn't you say Ted was a blogger on Runner's World? And he's talked about how he runs, and like I frequently talk about how much I'm not a fan of running. But here's so they're like, well, Jonathan, like, yeah, here's the point. If running is working for you, I support running wholeheartedly. Right. What I don't support is an individual, like there was this individual named Kim Raines, who said, I've run 18 marathons and gained 18 pounds. I have no idea what to do. Like, I am at a loss.
Yeah.
And that's a different story. Like, I don't care what you're doing, if you're doing the eccentric training we talk about in my work, and you are not seeing good results, do something else. Like it's the results that are key, and you of course don't want to do random things that aren't rooted in anything. But the thing that, just for the listeners who are listening, might be like, well, what's going on here? The point is that if running is working for you, that's awesome. The goal is find something that works for you, and if it's not working for you, stop doing it. It's that simple.
Right. Unless it's something that you enjoy on the face of it, and you enjoy running. If is it Kim that you said? Yes. If she runs 18 marathons and gets something else out of running the marathons, which a lot of people do, then that's great. It's more, if her goal was weight loss and thinking that the marathons are going to be the weight loss vehicle, then you're exactly right. not working, obviously.
Yeah, well, but that's such a key point, Ted, and it's something where, like, when you step back, it seems so obvious, but it's really not. For example, like, I enjoy reading very much. Like, reading is a wonderful hobby for me, but I don't read with the expectation it's going to lower my body fat percentage.
Right.
And I'm not disappointed when reading doesn't lower my body fat percentage, but that's because I have stepped back and said, like, I'm reading because it brings me joy, and it is effective at doing that. I mean, we all do things that we hope will bring us joy and actually don't. And if we would step back and take a look at that, we'd be like, actually, why am I doing this? I'm not very happy afterwards.
Right. I tell you, the workouts that I'm now totally digging are these tire flipping workouts.
Yep.
I picked up a couple tires, and they're a blast. And, I don't know if it's changing my body. I don't know if I'm getting stronger from doing them, but we get a group of people who come out and, do a group workout for about an hour, flipping tires and slamming sledgehammers and, all kinds of different exercises. And it's just fun.
Well, and I would assume, Ted, you don't go out afterwards and complain about how disappointed you are with your exercise results afterwards.
Right.
Because that is the one thing which can sometimes be a challenge is you got to kind of do two things. You can ascribe to the, like, kind of do whatever works for you as long as it works for you. But again, you can't swear by it and then complain that it's not working. Like, you got to have both.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and Ted, one other thing that I wanted to talk with you about is we discussed this. 90% of it is pretty baseline, and we get the non-processed foods, those kinds of things. But Ted, it's actually interesting because I wonder if that actually is a baseline. And now here's what I mean by that is that, for example, the most recent Coca-Cola advertising campaign, it's just 140 calories, so everyone just needs to calm down.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really two different baselines. There's the quantity baseline, and there's the quality baseline. And the quantity baseline has been the baseline.
Yes.
Really, statistically, the whole calorie counting approach started to fall off in popularity in the mid-90s. But it is, like, in a lot of people's minds, the baseline isn't non-processed food. It's 1,400 calories a day. As long as you eat 1,400 calories a day, it can be whatever the hell you want it to be from, it's calorie restriction. Right. Do you think there's a shift happening there?
Yeah, I do, and I think that's an excellent point. I mean, a lot of what you're referring to is really, I guess, in the Weight Watchers mentality. Count the points, count the calories. If you want to decide that your daily calorie consumption is going to be in 2 Big Macs, so be it. But you're not going to have anything else for the rest of the day. My sense is just, I think more and more we're just seeing various approaches being, listen, it's all about whole, good, from the earth foods, and give yourself, a little bit of leeway if you want to deviate here and there, but that's the whole key, is not going crazy. I mean, I think several diets talk about cheat days and cheat meals. I thought it was interesting. I interviewed Liam McIntyre, who is the lead actor in Spartacus, the show Spartacus, and I was talking to him about his, fitness and nutrition plan, and basically they eat clean, they clean as clean as can be, except for 2 hours a week. So they don't even have they don't have a cheat day or a cheat meal. They have a cheat 2-hour window. So if you want to eat 3 meals in that 2-hour window, or, something right at 2:00 and then something right at 4:00, that's their window. And I thought that was a pretty interesting approach, is like, it's structure, but it's wiggle room. And I think what kills so many people is just rigid structure, because I know it's killed me, is that if I feel like I'm following a plan and I'm doing great, as soon as I make a mistake, I say, forget it, I'm done. And I think that for a lot of people that live in this culture where they grew up on Coke and they grew up on fast food and they grew up on their mom's meatballs and, this really kind of rich, maybe not ideal food, you gotta, there's got to be a little leeway, I think,
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's got to be something that works for you. I mean, there, and I know there's some individuals like myself, where I use the analogy of a vegan, where a vegan is not, like, they don't have a cheat day once a week where they eat meat. And it's not because they're explicitly trying not to do it. They just don't want to. Like, what works for them, what makes them happy, and what gives them the results they're after is never eating any sort of animal product. But again, if that works for them, that's great. And maybe you want to try it a little bit, but the barometer has got to be you. And don't beat yourself up if it doesn't work for you. Let the results be. I mean, it's ultimately, we're just talking about pragmatism, right? Like, judge the efficacy of anything by how the results manifest themselves in your life.
I have had many, many ups and downs when it comes to, but I've never really said, okay, this is 100% out of my diet. But a year and a half ago, I decided, you know what? I am a diet soda addict. I mean, like bad. Like from the time I was in my early 20s till now, I would drink probably half gallon to a gallon a day. It was bad. And, more and more research coming out saying, drinking diet drinks, even though they're no calorie, are tied to obesity and weight gain, and not to mention all the chemicals that are in there. A year and a half ago, I decided that's it. No more. Not drinking anymore. Not even going to allow myself a sip. Not even going to allow myself one day a week, because I thought, you know what if I give it up for 6 days and then maybe on Saturdays I'll have Diet Coke? Because I knew that if I had it on Saturdays, I would say, well, the weekends will be fine. And weekends can mean Friday, which can also mean Thursday night. And then, and then by that time you're back to where you started. So a year and a half ago, I said, done. And I haven't had a sip in, I guess that's over 500 days now. And I don't know if it had any effect. God knows if it had any long-term health effects in terms of my systems. But I just, there are some things that you have to make the decision on. And, I just bring that up as an example because you brought up the vegan and the meat example, is that sometimes if there is an Achilles, that maybe you do have to address it head on and say, this is going to be my one thing. I'm not giving up ice cream or whipped cream or, these other things. I'm going to have it in moderation, but Diet Coke, I'm done. Mm-hmm. And, it's where can you make your choices that will ultimately help you, I guess.
Well, that's cool. And what I hear here, Ted, is really, this is just a message of really just individual empowerment, and saying, in some ways, this is going to sound a little silly, but we each as individuals need to take the power back. Yeah. Really, right? I mean, we need to own this. And certainly we can have coaches and guides, but ultimately, I mean, it's almost more of a like Eastern philosophy, Buddhist kind of thing, where it's you've got to find this for yourself. And that really is the trend that's really going to stick around, maybe, is that the championing of the individual here. That's
right. But you know what I think goes hand in hand with that is this sense of community. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you own your life and you own your body. But I think one of the greatest empowerments of that is sense of community. And I think that's why my tire workouts on Fridays work, because, 2, 4, 8 of us get together and push each other. I think that's why these online discussion groups and online Facebook groups and friends can work, because knowing somebody's got your back, knowing somebody's there to lean on, somebody's there that has experienced the same thing is hugely powerful. I mean, for my Runner's World blog, this was, about a year ago, I was like, man, I am so stinking slow, but I have a goal where I want to break 30 minutes in the 5K, which is probably slow for a lot of people listening, and a lot of people saying, oh my gosh, how can you run that slow? So I was like, okay, I'm just putting it out there. I don't like to talk about time because I don't want people to judge me, but I'm going to try to break 30 minutes in a 5K. So I started this group where I said, okay, anybody who wants to join me in this quest to break 30 minutes, we're going to do it, and we can kind of lean on each other and help each other. So I put it out there, and I thought I was hoping to get a dozen people to join, because please let there be 12 people in this world who haven't run a 5K in under 30 minutes. So I'm like, oh my gosh, hopefully 12 people will join. Right now it has 800 members, close to 800 members. And it just made me realize, what? We see all the idealized body images, and we see, people who are in great situations, and we also see the far end, because we get hit over the head with the obesity stats and all that. But there's this whole great land in the middle of people who are busting it and trying to reach goals. And they're all, even though we're all individual, we're all kind of the same, we're on the same journey in a lot of ways. And at least in this particular goal, having this group has been so empowering, I think, for not just me, but for a lot of people, to be able to have other people who are going through similar things. So I think you're exactly right in that it's taking over as individuals, but knowing that it probably won't work if you go at it alone, and your chances of succeeding will be much, much better if you have some kind of sense of community. And that's not always from your family, because your family maybe have different goals. Your family already may be in great shape and can't understand what you're going through, or may have no interest in getting in shape. But, and it may not be your friends. It may be people you don't even know. So where are you going to get this sense of community that will inspire, motivate, encourage, and all the things that are back to that thing we initially talked about, which is the psychological element of it all?
Absolutely. And hopefully you can find that community, which also you have a community that respects the individual in a sense that, Ted, you may have, I'm sure you've seen this, where someone will maybe try to join one of these online communities, but because they don't follow the rules, then they get tossed out of the community. It's like, well, you can't join because you're being more individualistic. So
Right. Well, it's been with this group. We haven't really had that happen, but what we've seen is that main group that we have for this sub 30-minute 5K. There have been 4 or 5 groups that have splintered off from that. So people with other specific goals, like a handful of people noticed they were all in the same boat when it came to weight loss. So a bunch of people formed this other group, and a bunch of people were really into strength training to go into addition with their running. So some people formed a subgroup within it, and you're right. It's like you find ways to find people who work for you, even if some of them don't.
Oh, that's awesome, Ted. Well, what's next for you? I mean, you've been doing all kinds of stuff. What's next on the horizon?
I just I plug away with my teaching and my writing, and the last thing that I did, I ran a marathon in 2010. That's how I started my blog for Runner's World. I was the marathon virgin for a year, and kind of chronicled my experiences training for that. And still kind of representing the extra large set, and that's how kind of the Big Guy blog spun off of that. So as I mentioned, I've never been one who's a real speedster. So the way I get satisfaction is trying to take, when it comes to fitness, is trying to take on challenges that I'm not sure I can complete. So the last couple of years, I've done these Tough Mudder races, and this year I've signed up for Florida Ironman. So I am going to be attempting in my non-triathlete body to swim 2.5 miles, bike 112, and run a marathon. All under the 17-hour time limit. So it's kind of what I like doing. I know I'm not going to be a blazer, but I like trying to gut it out and trying to stretch myself and, seeing what I can do. And I also like to think that, that's what people can and should be doing, is stretching themselves and making themselves uncomfortable and enjoying the journey along the way.
Well, it sounds like, really, Ted, you're just a champion of self-awareness. And that's what I love. I mean, all I hear is like this: you are a beacon of self-awareness, and you are just promoting self-awareness. And that's awesome, because really that is what we need. The unexamined life is not worth living, as was said many thousands of years ago.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, Ted, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, if you haven't checked out Ted's work and his website. Oh, and Ted, by the way, where can we go to follow your progress on this triathlon journey?
Well, I'll be writing it on runnersworld.com. If you search under blogs, you could find the Big Guy blog. I'll be writing in about that, and I think that's part of the journey. You hold yourself accountable, and if it works, great. And it's maybe part of the inspiration too, is to keep you going, knowing that other people are saying, this guy's never going to be able to do it.
I love it. Boy. And after you check out Runner's World and the Big Guy blog, head over to tedspiker.com. Also check out Ted's show at thebodycast.org. And of course, follow him on Twitter at Prof Spiker. Ted, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, Jonathan. Really appreciate it. It was great talking to you.
Hey, and everyone, remember to eat more and exercise less, but do that smarter. Talk to you soon.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff, like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.